Hey, great thinkers. I am so excited to have you back for the Think Great experience. Today's guest, I've been excited about having him on ever since I spoke to him about being on the show. We've got Tyler Kistner with us today. Tyler is a Marine Reserve officer, and he's also a consultant and advocate for veterans issues, anything going on in the veteran area. But most importantly, what excites me the most is that he's also a congressional candidate. And so this is a big new leap in your journey of greatness, Tyler. So I just wanted to say welcome. Excited to have you here. Always good to be with another Marine, and just love to have you share a little bit about your background with us.
No, and it's truly a blessing to be on this show. So thank you so much for the invite. And yeah, just my story is a very simple and very quick one. Only 33 years short, but born and raised in Minnesota. I was blessed to have met my high school sweetheart. Married her after we both graduated from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and being millennials, we were going through the recession, so as I was looking for a future career to keep my family afloat, the Marines was always an option, and I commissioned as an officer, first serving as an infantry officer before being assessed and selected into special operations. And I mean, just the journey I took, every step of the way has always been a new adventure, but blessed to have had my wife there along every step of the way. I finally reached that point where family was becoming more of a priority than having to leave them and deploy for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's where we made the decision to come back home to both of our families here in Minnesota. And as we made that step back, had a lot of friends and family encourage me to look at running for Congress. And we prayed about it and ultimately took that step of faith and, did a congressional run in 2020. Was not the results we wanted, but we were the closest race across the entire country and outperformed the president. And my opponent underperformed President Biden by the most. So this go around for our congressional run in Minnesota's 2nd district in 2022, we are being considered one of the top targeted races for the Republican Party as a key pickup opportunity. So the adventure continues.
Well, let me ask you this. So you had an amazing run with the Marine Corps, and you're still a reserve officer, correct?
I am, yes. I did not want to fully give everything up
Yeah.
at every moment of it.
You know what I learned by being in the Marines, and I was only in for 4 years, but the traits, the principles, just the mindset of being a Marine is so applicable to everything we do out there. Can you share any insights with the listeners today that you were able to pull during a congressional run that you tapped back into, your training and development as a Marine? What stood out to you as the most beneficial?
That was the greatest part. Looking back, I mean, going through the experiences of becoming a Marine, getting instilled into the culture and the history of what it takes to be a Marine, and just the honor of carrying that title. A lot of my experiences that I went through, from 4 overseas deployments to just a total of 10 years of learning how to be a true servant leader and really putting the needs of the Marines first and foremost. And more importantly, it was always mission accomplishment. I've worked with ambassadors, I've worked with foreign dignitaries, political appointees, as well as politicians. And those experiences of just understanding how to have confidence in every scenario and how to conduct and carry yourself in the public arena just set me up for easy success when it
Yeah.
came to politics.
Well, just, I remember learning about bearing, how to carry and conduct yourself. And as an 18-year-old kid going through boot camp, you're like, what is this word? What do they mean? But you realize how much application there is to that, not only in the Corps, but when you get out. I'm going to guess, like me, when you got out or when you transitioned, by learning so much on leadership through the Marine Corps lens, isn't it easy to see where there's gaps in leadership elsewhere?
You're absolutely right. That was one of the biggest reasons I stepped in to run for Congress, was seeing the lack of true leadership from our elected officials, the people
Yeah.
who are trying to serve and represent the American people to make sure that they are already putting the voices and interests of the constituents and the citizens of this country first and foremost. You're just not seeing that. In Marines, it was instilled in us from day one.
That's right.
And if you ever, swayed from that moral or ethical code, you were called out on it.
Yeah,
So
yes, you were.
you always were held to a higher standard than everybody else. And it's that same type of standard, that same type of conduct that I brought from the Marines and am looking to bring to Congress, but also just bring to my community here in Minnesota.
I mean, I think the great thing about leadership, the great thing about having someone like you as our candidate is that leadership doesn't just stay in the workplace. This goes on the home front with us. We could be better leaders in the community. We certainly need, I don't think there's anybody listening, and it doesn't matter how they vote. I think everybody would agree our country deserves better leaders.
Absolutely. I mean, with the Marines, we always said there's no spotlight performers. And that's what we're getting a lot of from our elected officials. That's
Right.
what you're getting a lot of from everybody who wants to call themselves now. The key word out there is public figure.
Right.
However many likes you can get. That doesn't mean you're a public figure.
Yeah.
We need leadership. We need people who are always looking to set the example, even when no one's looking. And that's the type of conduct, and that's the type of person you want representing you and always fighting on your behalf. Um, in the Marines, you were never off. It was always on. And the
right.
mission always came first. And you did everything you could to be a resource to those you led, as well as those around you, to ensure that they succeeded and you accomplished the mission together. Didn't matter about your political background. It didn't matter about your ethnicity or your upbringing. You all came together as one because you knew the mission was more important than yourself.
Yeah, I remember when I served, everybody was the same color. We were green. They reminded us that everybody's green. We're just different shades of green, they would say,
Yep.
But I think that, it's interesting in an organization that has roughly 200,000 people, the Marine Corps is very diverse. Certainly not as diverse as our country as a whole or even our state, but they're diverse. And what I find is that when you start there, they're trying to unify you on shared values.
Yes.
I think this is missing in politics today. I think this is, well, here's my values. I only want people that agree with this. And I've noticed, and I think a lot of people have noticed that, well, if you don't feel this way, we don't even like you. So there's a divide in the United States of America. It feels sometimes like it's the divided states of America. And I think that having people like you run for office gives us hope that we could have unification again.
And that's the biggest thing. It's not just Democrats, it's not just Republicans
Right.
to blame. It's both sides. And you're creating a divisiveness just off the title of whatever ticket you're running under.
Right.
For a political party. That's not how you accomplish things. That's not how you're going to look for the betterment of this country. And I mean, if you want to truly achieve greatness, you can't do it one-sided. You have to do it together, because when you're unified, that's truly how you can have a greater unified effort and a greater achievement towards greatness or whatever goals and vision you are looking to achieve.
Tyler, we may borrow that quote. You can't achieve greatness, when it's one-sided, right? I mean, we may paraphrase that, but I think that goes hand in hand with everything that we're trying to do today, whether it's political or business or even in our families. I think that there's too much one-sidedness right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So, you mentioned that the results weren't what you had hoped for. And so what were some lessons learned as you continue? And I'm excited that, I'm hearing, that there's going to be another run. So I can't tell you how fired up I am. Anytime we get a Marine on the ticket, we get fired up about it. But that had to be a devastating call that was made when you learned that the results didn't come out the way you wanted. How did you, after you get knocked off your horse, if you will, metaphorically speaking, how do you get back up? How do you pull yourself together and then make the decision to say, hey, I'm riding to the victory lane this time?
I mean, to say that November 4th, the wee hours of the morning at 4:30 was the first time I've ever experienced, failure or defeat. I would not be here today without the failures that I've went through. And they helped me make who I am today. So, you learn from them. You try to gain what you can. And I always like to say, you never find anyone who achieves greatness without going through a few failures.
Yeah.
And it's what you learn through those, but more importantly, how you get yourself back up. Was it devastating? Absolutely. but did I learn a lot having been a first-time candidate, never ran before? The energy, the momentum, the you know, the support that we built in a matter of 7 months, when most campaigns are 2 years, was something, just over remarkable. And that's where I just felt truly blessed. The amount of people
Yeah.
in Marines, respect was, I had to fight and earn it.
Sure.
But being an officer, it was almost given.
Yeah.
When I was running for Congress, every ounce of support I got was earned. And that was a humbling thing to see how many people just came out and volunteered their time and effort to help with this. So yeah, it was not a hard decision to pick back up and run again, especially how close we did come. And this time around, I mean, Marines are never defeated. We literally just maneuvered to a better position of advantage.
That's right. That's right. Improvise, adapt, and overcome, right?
Exactly. I mean,
well, I know
no better key phrase.
That's correct. I use it every day. Seriously. But you touched down on some things. We've got the improvise, adapt, and overcome. These are things that were in our mindset of being in that culture. Earned and never given. What you did, what your campaign did in that 7 months is really unheard of. And I think, a lot. I know when I met you for the first time, it was one of those, this guy has my commitment. I think that you come across extremely trustworthy in a political arena that may be a word that's lacking. And let me just ask this, because I have a lot of questions for you today.
I gotta love it.
You empower a lot of people. For me, I look up to what you are doing and what you're striving for, because I'll bet a lot of people have thought about tossing their hat into the political arena. It's something you consider. I have, but you actually did it. So I'm like, all right, well, he's light years ahead of me. But I know from meeting you, from getting to know you, that you're what I call an impact player. You want to make an impact in people's lives. This isn't about just having a title. And so what is the impact you want to make where do you see the opportunity for you to make an impact in Minnesota? I see a lot of them, by the way, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
And I mean, you're absolutely right. The whole reason, I mean, the core root of why I stepped into the ring to run for Congress the first time, and quite frankly, it took a few months to come to this, because I was telling my wife, like, I really feel like we need to do this. And she kept telling me, why are you wanting to do it? Where is your heart at?
Yeah.
And she said, until you can tell me a full answer that is something other than yourself, she goes, I can't support you. And it was something I kept praying about and pondering, and finally it just came out. It was, why I had been in the Marines in the first place. It was to give back to this country that gave so much. Why am I looking to run for Congress? Was to have an impact in people's lives and be a resource to them, and put their interest over special interest. That's ultimately at the core of what I'm looking to do. And the whole baseline of my campaign was servant leadership, looking to serve the people and be a resource to them. And I just keep going back to that, because that is exactly where my heart's at. That's exactly where my morals and values are set. Is you have to be a leader, and sometimes being a resource to someone it's not always fun. It's not always easy.
That's right.
But in the end, how can I make your conditions in life better so that you can be prosperous, and then your children and the future generations of America can continue to prosper and succeed, just as you and I had?
I wish your wife asked other candidates why they were running. What a great question.
So I'm selfish. I take her all for myself. So
I was going to say, yeah, I'm sure you're not sharing her with any other candidates, but that's a great question. I think that we have to ask ourselves that. I think the American people, certainly Minnesotans, have asked why people are running. Maybe they don't come out and even expect an answer. But you touched down on something. There's interests of the people, and then there's special interests. How much did your eyes get opened when you made the decision to run? Like, you went down a new pathway. You're like, you took the red pill, right? You're like Neo in the Matrix, where all of a sudden you saw something new. So anytime you go behind the scenes, like I was in the film industry, so what you see happen behind the scenes is different than what's in front of the camera, right? There's the final result, that final product. It looks different when they're making it.
And
what's that?
Yeah, I mean, when you got to see behind the curtain and really see the true Wizard of Oz, we all know that it's always talked about. Money runs politicians.
Yeah.
But that's why it's important to have a set of morals and values before you step into this, so that you can guide yourself effectively. And it's also the team you built around you to ensure that you maintain those high morals and values. With the Marines, it was always, honor, courage, and commitment. Who's your
Right.
honor going to? Who's the commitment towards? And really, it's all about those key things and where your heart is set and who you're really doing this for. And
I
that's
mean,
why I always say it's
speak
for
about
the.
courage. You have to have a lot of courage to run, because I'm assuming that there were probably some personal attacks also, right? I mean, things come out of the woodwork. I'm not saying you have to say any of them here, but I would say that most people probably who consider running, who don't, probably don't want to jump into the fire, because it's brutal out there.
It does take a lot of courage, but I mean that's why it's important to have a strong support network, a strong team around you, because you can't do anything alone.
Right.
For those who think they can, you're already stepping off to failure.
Yeah.
So ensuring that you have a support network, you have that team around you to continue to build you up. You're going to have highs and lows. Even as a leader, I always like to say it was the burden of leadership. You're always going to be carrying a little extra more weight than everybody else. And when everyone else is taking a break, you're still fully outworked. So, courage is not so much just the personal attacks as much as
That's
it
right.
is having courage to run through the ring and continue to go
Sure.
through fire time and time again. But as long as you know who you're doing it for and what you're doing it for, that really helps you continue to persevere. And I mean, that's why the greatest trait an individual can have is determination, because you are going to have your failures. You're going to be knocked down. You're going to run into difficulty. I mean, to achieve greatness, to say you're not going to go through adversity,
That's right.
um, that's just never going to happen.
I mean, not only have you been through adversity, you've been deployed, you've been
Yeah.
through the gas chamber,
I'd rather
helping to
deploy
turn the
6
state
months and go
around.
through that.
What's
Yeah.
that? Say that
So I'd rather
again.
deploy 6 months and go through that.
I know, right? The gas chamber. Woo. Still have flashbacks once in a while, but the interesting part is what you've been through in the Marine Corps. You're not going to transform Minnesota into a battalion, but you're going to take those leadership traits and principles and give hope. And another word that I like that you're saying a lot is team. You don't hear enough politicians talk about their team. It's very much, here's what I've done, here's what I'm going to do. But you're absolutely right. It's like making a movie. Okay, so maybe Spielberg directs it, but at the end, he's not the only name on the credits. I mean,
Yep.
there's hundreds of people involved. How important is teamwork to you? Not only just what you learned in the Marines, but just in general.
It's one of the most important things. I mean, yes, I am the face of the campaign. It's my name on everything. It's
Yeah,
my face out there in front of everything. I'm the one being marketed. As much as I love hearing "send in the Marine," eh, that's it. And
that's right.
really, it's not about me when it comes to why am I doing it? How am I doing it? Really, the amount of support I have behind the scenes that no one else looks at, I wouldn't even have been half as successful as I was without the team. And that's why you can't build a cohesive unit. You can't build a unified movement unless you have people bought in. And what are
That's
they
right.
bought into? Sure, they're bought into what I'm talking about. They're bought into me, but more importantly, they're bought into the vision that I'm trying to bring to Minnesota. This vision of really having politicians that don't look at how they can line their pockets when they walk out or how they can continue to fill the special interest, but more
That's
importantly,
right.
how are we going to have a movement that is a vision towards getting people back to work in good paying jobs, helping bring back up the economy. And I always like to say it, it's not about our generation, as young as my generation is compared to yours, no offense. It's about our future generations. It's about
It
my
is.
daughter and my son. It's their generation and future generations to come, and how we can set the conditions to make sure that they're going to be successful, that they have a great country to grow up in where everyone can flourish and everyone has an ability to prosper.
And imagine now, I know you've got your announcement date coming up for your second run. You've got a lot more time in your favor this go around,
Yes, that is one thing that I look at as a great blessing. Where before it was a complete marathon,
right?
um, now we can actually slowly build ourselves up to
Yeah,
this instead of just going at the dead heat of 100-yard dash. So
right. Well, you hit the ground running, and I mean, you created quite a wave of support. which was phenomenal, since, as you've said before, you were virtually an unknown. It's not like your family was a household name. You didn't have a lot of financial backers from the standpoint that you weren't investing millions of your own dollars into the campaign.
I wish I had millions of dollars to invest, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this: what was the thing that pleasantly surprised you the most when you ran, from a support level? When you started to see people come out of the woodwork to support you, it wasn't just because you were in the Marine; it's because it's the person that you are. But what really stood out to you on your campaign as one of those most positive attributes?
I mean, I might go into a diatribe here, but here's going to be a noodle soup or a word soup for you. I mean, when I was stepping out to run, my greatest fear was who would want to support me. That's what was always holding me back. I mean, a 33-year-old guy who was in the Marines. Yes, towards the end of my career, I worked on the executive staff of a commanding general and actually did work with Congress on some legislative issues. But really, who was going to jump behind me and really carry forward this message that I was trying to bring, and this movement of
Right,
having the people's voice being represented. And I was surprised at how many people just jumped behind it. They loved the enthusiasm, they loved the vision, they loved just this team effort we had of building this cohesive unit. And more importantly, it was something they could jump behind because they wanted something new. They didn't want the same old rhetoric, the same
that's
old,
right.
or the same old divisiveness that we continued to create. And that's really my age, my experience in the Marines. The things I thought would hold me back were actually the things that most people clung on to, because when you walk in and say you're a Marine, that tells people you held yourself to a higher standard, that you've went through a lot to stand up for this Constitution and this country,
That's
and
right.
you are willing to sacrifice and fight for whatever it is to ensure the mission is accomplished, that the people have what they need.
And I think also too that the fact that you went down the officer route, and maybe a lot of listeners don't understand the difference between enlisted and officer. I enlisted, I went to a recruiter, and I went to boot camp, and you took a different path. With college education, you came out as a commissioned officer. What I've always found fascinating in the Marines, in the Army, the Navy, Air Force, every branch, is that a 22-year-old second lieutenant outranks about 80% of the rest of the armed forces. Immediately upon being commissioned, you outrank the most senior enlisted. Now, granted, you're going to rally behind them and help support them as much as they're going to help support you. But to a certain extent, age in the military is a non-factor in the way it's set up. I mean, if I had stayed in 30 years, I would have been 48 years old, probably a sergeant major, just a crusty, salty sergeant major. But at 22 years old, I would have called you sir. I would have saluted you. And so that age discrepancy, there's an established understanding that it's experience, it's respect, and I think that's missing in most businesses, because people
It
get
is.
tweaked when they now
Most
report into somebody
businesses, our
younger, like that's a
society,
bad thing.
it's missing in a lot of places.
Yeah,
You're going out there, and yes, I outranked everyone in my unit, and some individuals were 45 years old, and I
yeah,
outranked them. They had to listen to but it was a two-way street, and that's what the Marines really instilled in
yeah,
the officer corps is you may be in charge, but understand where the experience and the wisdom is. I mean, true wisdom for an officer is understanding you don't know everything, but you know who to go to get it. And when you're in a chaotic situation, when it comes time to making a decision, it does fall on you, and you now have that burden. But that's the beauty of being the officer is
that's
you
right.
can glean from all the experience, the advice, the recommendations of those around you, but ultimately you have to make the
Yeah.
decision, and they're going to carry it out. And that's where it's the two-way street in the Marine Corps. And that's where the whole honor, courage, and commitment comes into.
I can imagine that when you made the decision to run, once you make the decision, then there's this overwhelming feeling like, what have I done? Like this is much bigger than I ever thought. How much did you rely on your officer style, right? Where you could tap into other people's experience to learn what needed to be done on the campaign? Because I know you had people that had been in politics a long time come to your support, come to your aid. How often did you find yourself in order to be on that pathway to greatness, just tapping into their experience.
A lot. It was quite a bit. I mean, my wife even said, this last campaign in 2020, I was the intern. I never ran a campaign before. So what to do and what was right, I had to lean on the experience and the advice of others.
Yeah,
But ultimately, with the experience I had, with, a great deal of judgment and wisdom, as they were telling me things, you definitely know when to make the right decision.
sure.
If it is going against what everyone's saying, just based off my morals and values. So it was something that, yes, my experience in the Marines set me up tremendously for success running for Congress, especially when, in special operations, I was a 30-year-old captain in North Africa having to brief an ambassador who's, the direct voice of the president of the United States in whatever country they're in. He was listening to me for every topic regarding special operations. I definitely leaned a lot on the subject matter expertise of my Marines with me to ensure that I was giving the best advice and recommendation to him. And then going into this congressional run, it was that same type of experience of
Yeah,
knowing, hey, no matter what situation, climb or place, like you said, you adapt, you overcome.
that's
In
right.
my campaign, it was a lot of adapting, it was a lot of overcoming, and you push forward as long as you have that goal, you have that vision and that end mark. How you get there, you may have the perfect plan, but once you get enemy contact, then you start adjusting, adapting, and overcoming
That's
because
right.
that is complete garbage and you're going on the fly.
That's right.
To say we could predict COVID, I mean, I would have loved it. And then on top of everything else thrown in my
I
campaign.
mean, I listen. I'll tell you what. I'd rather follow a Marine through the chaos than follow somebody else. I mean,
Amen.
these are crazy times. These are, we've heard it. Excuse me. We've heard it many times before. These are unprecedented times. Um, what was it? We were supposed to flatten the curve in 2 weeks, right? Which was 50 weeks ago. So I think that we deserve to have leaders who know how to improvise, adapt, and overcome, but also have some humility to them too, who are willing to learn. One of the things I'm most fascinated by, because I believe this is my style of leadership too, is you want to give people a voice in Minnesota. And when you say that, where are you finding that perhaps that voice is needed, or why do they not have it with the political leaders we have now? Why do most people not have a voice today?
When you elect someone to Congress, you're electing them to represent you and fight on your behalf. You're not sending them to Congress to only vote right with a party line. Everyone has different opinions, different viewpoints on everything. And when I say you're fighting for that voice, you're taking the majority of that district you're representing and really looking at the majority of the state and the country and what is going to be in their best interest. And sometimes that's not with the party line.
Right.
Sometimes that's with those you're representing and those you're fighting for. So that's where you really have to represent those
Right.
who are voting you into office. I mean, you said it. What's the honor that or title that a congressman has in
Right.
Congress? The only thing is they have a voting card that they get to say yes or no on for any bill. Outside of that, you are a fellow constituent of that district. So you are one voice
Right.
out of 700,000. So how can you best represent those 700,000 in that district, whether they align themselves as Republican or Democrat?
Right.
It's how can you make this country to the best where people who are citizens of this country can come here and ensure that they have that American dream. They have the ability
Yeah.
to live it out and succeed in whatever they want to succeed in. Not
I have
saying
a.
everyone in the NFL, I'm not going down that route, but
That's right.
having the opportunity to step out and do what they feel they want to do and let them have the freedom over it.
I mean, we're entering an interesting stage in our country, right? In the world as a whole. I feel that there's three phases to chaos, right? There's the great obstacle, which was the pandemic. There's the great transition, and then the great new era. But I feel like most people try and ignore the transition. They want to go right from the obstacle to the new era. And as you know, having been in the Marines and knowing a lot of service members, sometimes transitions can be our hardest phase. I think that, we went through obstacles. They were called the obstacle course. I mean, the Marines, the Marines didn't even get creative with the names, right? We're going to go over some obstacles today at the obstacle course. But what I figured is that every obstacle I went over made me better. It made me stronger, made me more proficient. And we've gone through this great obstacle and we're starting to transition out of it now. I think that this is when we need stronger leaders. And what I've discovered with most politicians is there's not a lot of examples on how they've been developed as leaders. They hold a title, but they haven't had the development to lead people. And I think that's been lost a lot in politics. I'm committed to getting every politician into my leadership development course. I'm focused on that. But I'm going to imagine that people are going to want to follow somebody in this transition phase and have that voice back. And I think that you're going to have to tap into that trait, determination, as you announce this this next run. How do you plan to focus that determination during this next run?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the big thing. And you said transition. That's perfect, because the transition is from something that you have now overcome, and you're getting into a state of comfort.
Right.
If you're living comfortably, it means you're not striving for any more greatness. Like you've reached it, and your life has now become dull and boring. Those transition periods, they're hard, they're
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and quite frankly, they're the worst thing to go through, because yes, it's putting you back into an uncomfortable situation. But as Marines, we were always told, and the best quote I was ever given in the Marine Corps was, when I was in special operations in the freezing cold, soaking wet. I had one guy look at me and he goes, "Start getting comfortable being uncomfortable." And that's exactly the mindset and the determination that you need. You will go through a lot of uncomfortable situations. And I mean, how do you pivot and move forward?
Right.
Even Republicans might not like what I say on certain things, but it's what is going to be best for the majority. And
I think
it's
that goes back to giving them their voice.
exactly. I'm not here to represent just a select group. That's not my role as a leader, as a representative. And if I'm really fighting for the voices of America, that is exactly where we need to push through and work together.
That's right.
How toxic that phrase has now become, which is so sad, because you want the government to work. You want the government to work for the people, to get
It's
out of
in
the
our
way.
best interest. Let's be
Exactly.
realistic. If it works, this is good for everybody.
Yes. And when you create the conditions for, the private sector to run itself, and for the government to just be there to help ensure that things run smoothly, but more importantly, that they run fairly, where you don't have, monopolies or anything like
Right.
that. It is always putting the people and the interests of the people, the small businesses, the American worker, and the American family first and foremost.
So let me ask you a question. You've talked about being a member of special forces in the Marine Corps, special ops. Can you tell us, without having to kill me for telling me something, can you tell us a little bit more about what that entailed? Most people don't understand what that means when you said you were a member of special ops.
So yeah, when I went through special operations, it's different for the Navy SEALs. And not trying to poke fun at any other service, but the Marines and Army do it a little tougher, because we take people who are seasoned. So you cannot just go right into special operations as a civilian or just normal person into the Marines or Army. Yet you have to have gone through some sort of 3-year job
Yeah.
before you can actually go. And when you go, it's for the Marines, it was a 6-week physical fitness and mental endurance type evaluation, where they're testing you on how strong you are physically, but then how strong you are mentally, psychologically. And they're ensuring that, under duress, under chaos and uncertainty, that you can still function as a leader, that you can continue to push through and figure out a way. I mean, at one point, I can say this. I had to think about that. You walk up and it's a team building exercise,
Okay.
where you have 3 logs, you have a metal bar, 2 wheels, and some sort of other odd thing sitting there. And they say, get all of that from point A to point B, while you're wearing an 80-pound ruck, and you have to come together as a team. But as the officer, you were in charge of all this. Uh, to say it was easy is an understatement. But you find a way and you work together. And ultimately, there was a time where, everyone's bickering. You have to make a decision,
That's
and
right. I guarantee someone listening right now is writing all that down, and they're going to try and get their they're going to try and implement this. In fact, I can think of a few business leaders right now. I know they're writing this down, saying we got to figure out how to build teams here.
And but then,
Go ahead.
to finish off with special operations, the big thing after you're evaluated, once you actually go into special operations, it's a follow-on 6-month school.
Yeah.
And when you think special operations, you think really cool things, and they do all this. What we mastered was simplicity in the basics. That's what made us special, was that we could literally master the basics, the things that everyone else would overlook and say, "Oh, that's so minute, that's so
Right.
simple." But it's not. The basics is how you conduct yourself and how you're successful. Because if you can't do that, you're never going to do the big things.
It's interesting. When I was at film school, which was probably far less difficult than special forces and special ops,
Everything's difficult in its own way. Come on now.
everything's difficult in its own way. But every kid goes to film school, and you want to be the next Steven Spielberg, or whatever you want to be, Martin Scorsese, and everybody's has these ideas of making these incredible motion pictures. And when you get there, they start off by saying, this is how you load a camera. Back when we had film, this is how you use a light meter. You had to learn the basics before you could do anything special. I'm going to parallel that focus on simplicity and basics to where we are as a nation right now. How, in your opinion, kind of borrowing from special ops, how important is it that we get back to simplicity and the basics in our country as a whole, in our state of Minnesota, that we get everybody on board with this, to go back to the basics?
It's very important right now. We're trying to overcomplicate everything, whether it's the cancel culture or whatever movement. And I don't want to get too political on this because we're talking about greatness, but I mean, simplicity is not adding and making more amendments or anything to bills that are already there. I
Right.
mean, the Constitution in its original form was near perfect. It definitely needed some amendments and adapted,
Yeah.
from where our founding fathers were to where we are today.
Yep.
But the amount that they're putting in there, that's what's scary, is that they're trying to overcomplicate and make the Constitution something that's complex, when it was simple and just very simplistic in what it wanted to achieve, where it was limited government, which allowed people to truly be free.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we need to get back to the basics. We need to get back to simplicity, so that people can live, not really simple lives, but people can live lives where they have an opportunity, they have the ability to live out that American dream.
That's right. And they can create their own destiny.
That's the beauty of America, that you don't get a lot in other countries around
That's
that.
right.
I've been a lot around the world, not to say
That's
everywhere,
correct. Right.
but the Marine Corps said, "Hey, you're going to see the world," and they held me to it. So,
They do stick to their commitment.
yes, they do. They
So,
keep their bargain.
Tyler, let me ask you this. You have mentioned a lot about faith. How important is it for you to be able to fall back to your faith during challenging times, whether it was in the Marine Corps, whether it was running for Congress? How have you relied on your faith to help make you through everything, to help get through?
No, it was, my wife was the one who brought me to church as juniors in high school.
Oh, so that wasn't your idea.
No, this was, she was my prom date. And our date after prom was her taking me to her Wednesday church group. And I'm like, oh boy. But since then,
I like her style. I like her
yeah,
style.
exactly. And I have, really come to just grow in my faith. And
Yeah,
I don't try to impose or tell someone what religion they need to follow.
sure.
But for me, my morals and values are set in my faith, and that's
Yeah,
exactly how I guide everything I do. And that's, it is very important, because it helps you mentally when
yeah,
you're able to go through something and have an idea of something bigger and better than yourself, and a greater purpose, a greater calling, whatever that may be. um, in the challenging times, in the difficult times, and definitely through adversity, my faith was very important
Yeah.
every step of the way. I mean, I'm a 5-0, 150 pound nothing guy. To say I went through special operations where the average height was, 5'10" or above and, 220,
Yeah.
uh, to come out with every physical fitness award is, a blessing. But it was one of those, you need to have something that you can believe in above yourself. And that's why in the, Marine Special Operations, we always said there were, 3 core things. It was mind, body, and spirit. You had to have the mental capacity, you had to have the body, the physical strength, but you also had to have that spiritual being, that connection to something outside of yourself to really drive towards, success and through the difficult, with determination to achieve anything above, the standard, which is greatness.
I mean, on this pathway to greatness, I think that the word faith is not used enough anymore. It almost takes courage to mention faith. You're afraid of what people might think. What I love is you have the courage to speak it. You know, I feel that challenging times require more faith, and yet we're in a society where we want to cancel faith,
And I
right?
was deployed to, the Indo-Pacific, where there was Buddhism, there was Hinduism, and
Right.
then, I was deployed to North Africa, where it was Islamic faith. And I was very open with who I was and my faith,
Sure.
The Lord. And they actually respected that more because they understood my background, my values, where I'm coming from, just as much as I understood theirs. So if you can be open about that and communicate, people get a better understanding of who you are and a better understanding of what you're going to be. Because if your
That's right.
morals and values are based in your faith, well, then you have nowhere else to look of
That's right.
who he is in the inside than whether it be the Bible, the Torah,
Sure.
the Quran, whatever you want it to be. And that's why it was so important. It still needs to be important. You have to be open. If you tried to hide who you are, people are going to find out.
I think there's a lack of genuineness in the political arena, and not saying you, I'm saying in general.
Oh,
I
no,
don't,
don't worry. Yeah,
I don't think.
absolutely.
Well, I actually read an article, and I can't remember where I read this, but I was doing a sales training, and there was an article saying that the average buyer, there's only 3% trust in this country for salespeople. And I'm like, geez, that's pretty low. But there was only one profession that was lower than sales, and that was politicians. And it was this trust factor, right? They don't trust them. And yet when I met you, I trusted you. There were things that you were saying that you weren't afraid to say, whether it was your faith, whether it was serving in the Marine Corps. You're letting people know who you are, and I think that's important. You know,
It is. I mean, I've heard, I've also seen politicians who will literally tailor a speech to their audience. I mean, obviously, there is a time where an audience doesn't, whether I'm talking to people in rural Minnesota who are farmers,
yeah,
people want to hear how I'm going to sit there and work with, the cities of Minnesota to really help with, this, that, and the other.
right.
They want to know about the roads. They want to know about the agriculture issues. So there's a way you have to tailor some of your
Sure.
speech to, but
But you
where
can't tailor your values.
what's that?
You can't tailor your values.
Exactly. And
Y-
that's where, I mean, you see some and they try to change who they are in front of their audience.
Oh,
And
some of
I,
them develop an accent. It's the weirdest thing. I'm like, that doesn't sound like how he sounded a week ago.
and it's one of those that, no, be who you are, because
Yeah,
what the people want to trust, the people want to support, the people ultimately, if I'm fighting for your vote, which more importantly, a vote is one thing. What I'm fighting for is your support, because I want your support to say you trust me to carry your values, to carry your interest, and to make sure I'm carrying
that's right.
what you deem as an issue and priority in your life, what I'm going to carry and fight for in DC. So you have to know who I am. And that's where that trust comes. I'm here to be, one of 700,000, but I am the face of the one in 700,000.
A lot of
Tough one to get
people.
out for a Marine. And that's why you have to be who you are.
Sure.
It's going to come out in today's day and age of the information age, which very little, a lot of information, very little truth. But
Well, that's right.
It's out
But
there.
you'll be outed fast if you lack authenticity.
Yes.
I mean, how many times on any campaign trail did somebody say, I'm not going to cancel this to an audience, and then over here, I'm canceling this? It was the same thing. And you're like,
No
well, which
comment.
one's the
I can
truth?
name one individual specifically, but yeah, you tell the audience one thing and you act a
Sure.
completely separate way. That's the type of political act that I want to get rid of. If I'm going to vote a certain way, I'm going to tell you. If I vote opposite, I'm coming back and explaining why I
Yeah.
voted against what I said before, because that's the ownership of the representative, is to explain every action, to explain every decision, and to ensure the people understand
right.
this is where my mind's at. But ultimately, I'm here to represent you and not myself.
I think your message of having faith is going to be more embraced during this transition phase than ever before, because what I found is the greater the challenge, the greater your faith, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I know in boot camp, everybody found Jesus. you know, um, and what I mean by that is every Sunday, you had the option of going to church, but church meant for 60 minutes, you got to go be around a naval chaplain who didn't cuss and choke you out. And yeah, he read the Bible, but you didn't have to be around your DIs. And so everybody was in church. But you got that message. And so, you were open for it. You don't take a bunch of 18-year-olds and especially 18-year-old guys, they're not banging the door down to get into church. But when the crisis is so great, or the challenge or the obstacle is so great, people more are open to faith. I think after this year of the pandemic, 52 weeks of uncertainty, 52 weeks of executive orders that shift so much confusion. And I feel that we don't need to be hit over the head with it. We know special interests are at play. We just know it. It doesn't even matter. For some people, they voted for somebody and they just know that person's probably not telling the truth, but I voted for them. I mean, the options are not great for us. And that's why I think having you run again is going to be music to people's ears. And I'm excited to support you. I told you already I would be your commandant of outreach. I'm still holding on to that title, but
I
we'll
love
figure
it.
that out. But
But
I'm
no,
excited to share you with more people.
and you're exactly right. It's really, I always like to say it's a new generation of political leaders to carry that mantle of political leadership into the
Yeah,
future, not just for our generation, but for future
that's right.
generations. And it, the important thing that you kind of hit on is really what options do people have? Yeah, like you look at a lot of things being pushed through Congress, and you're reading about it, and you go, the last COVID bill had less than 9% actually dedicated to COVID. The 91% was dedicated to special, pet projects or special interest.
Right.
So yeah, 1.9 billion towards special interest, and the American people aren't benefiting from it. That really hurts.
Yeah.
And it's that type of mentality that you have to get rid of.
But I
Uh,
think that's where you have people masking the truth.
yes,
And and we need truth unmasked right now. We don't have time for this. We have got to know what the truth is, and we need to know who we're following. It is amazing. I think that the reason trust is so low, both in politics and in sales, is people make promises they don't keep.
yes,
They say anything they want. One of the things I really enjoy about speaking with you is I'm confident every time we've had the chance to speak that what you say you're going to do. That integrity is, well, first of all, that was part of JJ Did Tie Buckle, right? The 14 leadership
oh
traits of the
boy,
Marine Corps.
yep.
Integrity, as most Marines would say, was throat punched into us. But we had to
And
say what
integrity.
we did, do what we say. I mean, integrity was so critical, but it's allowed to not be existent in politics right now. It needs to come back.
Absolutely. And I mean that is the most crucial aspect of it, because people, I mean, they come here and they say one thing, and then, where their integrity is, you know, made disgraced is when they go into DC, and then they completely vote or act a separate way. And that's just the frustrating part of seeing some elected officials out there. So it's being able to have someone who is out there, tells you exactly, not what you want to hear, what you need to hear.
That's right.
I always say, it's the age of information, but very little truth. You need to start speaking truth into everything. You said it's where a lot of people are looking for answers right now. And I mean, in Minnesota specifically, you have the riots of this past summer. You're having the trial of Chauvin start literally yesterday. So a lot of people are
Tensions
nervous.
are high.
They lost their jobs.
That's right.
Their faith was in something, other than themselves. Sometimes it was
Yeah.
material. And they're quickly realizing that faith fell short, and they're trying to find a better place to put that faith into. And that's why I was just blessed to have gotten into the church early back in high school and had a great, girlfriend turned into wife that just kept me honest, kept me open, and it definitely made me the man I am today. But
And unofficial campaign coordinator, right? She's
yeah,
keeping you on track.
she,
Well, you know what comes to
she
mind
was-
when I
she
think
was-
politics that we need more of? We need more politicians who embrace the word always. That was something in the military. Most mottos in the military are Latin, and they begin with semper, right? Ours was semper fidelis, always faithful.
Yep.
It would be very odd for a Marine to say, I'm sometimes faithful. That just doesn't make any sense. It would be odd to take wedding vows and tell your spouse, I will sometimes be faithful. Even the Coast Guard, semper paratus, always ready, or the Navy, semper fortis, always strong, or even the Space Force, their new one, semper supra, always above. I'm kind of jealous. That's a good one. I mean, it's not bad.
Hey, they got to learn from everybody else before they got to make their decision.
I like the way you
can't
think.
be too
That's right.
jealous.
Without the Marines, they wouldn't have a good motto.
And like we said in Marine Special Operations, it was never above you, never below you, always beside you. So that's always faithful.
I love that, and I think we need to just move away from that sometimes side, right? What I like about you, I'm gonna just my own subtle tagline for your campaign. I know you're gonna have, many different mottos, but semper Kistner, right? Always, because we need that more in politicians. It's so bad in the political arena that when a politician says something, nobody even expects him to follow through with it. They actually expect him or her to go the opposite way.
And it's the sad truth, and that's why in the Marines as an officer, I had my first platoon sergeant, senior enlisted advisor to me, and he looked over and told me three things: fair, firm, and consistent. He goes, that's all we expect from you. If you can do that, you'll succeed, and the men will respect you for it. And absolutely, everything I did had to be fair, firm, and consistent. And that's why having those morals and values and faith definitely made me fair, firm, and consistent. And, as much as when you were in the Marines, you never said Semper Fi. If you did, you joked about it. But when you got out and you saw the brotherhood, you saw that camaraderie you had
right.
with fellow Marines, Semper Fi took a whole new meaning.
It does.
Where every Marine I see, it's always Semper Fi, and it's that culture, that heritage we have with one another, that I will always have your back. I will always have your six, and there is nothing that you can go through where I won't jump in and make sure I'm by your side to help you get through it.
I just want to say this to all the listeners. how much do you want to have a politician have your six? Wouldn't that be refreshing? I mean, come on. When was the last time when was the last time, honestly speaking, we could say this person has our six? There's so few of them out there. And I'm ready for it. Tyler, I'm ready for it. And I think there's a lot of lessons here. One, never argue with your first sergeant, right?
Oh, amen.
The other thing too is, I'm big into cliches, mottos, phrases. The Marines, there's no shortage of our phrases and mottos and cliches. But when I ask people what their favorite quote is, I really loved yours because I am a huge Indiana Jones fan. And as soon as I heard your quote,
I was like, oh, good.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember seeing these movies in the theater with my dad, and your quote is, it's not the years, it's the mileage. Tell me a little bit about that thought on that quote.
So, and I mean, when everyone always asks me, what's your favorite quote? I just chuckle, because most people think, oh, he was a Marine, he went through this.
This is going to be deep.
Reagan's quote about Marines. I'm like, no, it's not a Reagan quote. Oh, it's probably a Lincoln quote. Like, nope, it's not a Lincoln quote. It is literally America's greatest hero. Now almost forgotten about, which is sad, but we'll make a comeback. It is Indiana Jones, just the best part about that quote was that's how I always loved to live my life. It was not, everyone looks at the years of, oh, you're only this old, or, oh,
That's right.
you've only done this.
Yeah.
It's more important about not how old you are, but what you have done with those years of your life. And, there are people I've met who are 65 plus, and they say, I've wasted so much of my life, and all I've been able to accomplish is this, that, and the other, which is
Yeah.
still a lot of accomplishments.
Sure.
But I never wanted to look back and say, what if? I never wanted to say, I could have done more. And so that's where it's, 33 years, but definitely over 500,000 miles, not through Delta, but multiple, is
Yeah.
what the importance is. You can't grow experience through a book.
Well,
You
and when
never,
Indiana Jones, when Indy said that quote in the very first movie on the ship, after he'd had his butt kicked and he was tired, there was an honesty to the way he said it.
and that was the beauty of it.
Yeah, there was a vulnerability that let you know that this hero is just a person. He's not trying to be someone he's not. Most of the time he gets a win, it's pretty lucky. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that shouldn't have worked out, but I'm glad it did. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that quote. I always love a good movie quote. So let me ask you this, Tyler. You've got your announcement of your campaign coming up. By the time this airs, it will have already been announced. So I appreciate you sharing it with me first. I've been excited about this since we talked. What are some levels of greatness that lie ahead for you? What are you striving for?
And everyone keeps asking, is this a stepping stone? Is this something for something? And I can't give them the answer they want to hear, because I mean, in all honesty, what I'm doing is really running to be the representative of the second congressional district. Why am I running to do that? Is to be a voice and a vision for this district, but also for this state, a vision for this
Yeah.
country at the national level, and where I can have the most impact in people's lives to make their opportunities, their conditions better, is in Congress. What's my vision of this? Is to, I mean, in the next decade, do as much as I can to be a resource and advocate for this country, just as much as I was in its defense in the Marines. Is this a stepping stone? Right now, no, it is not. It is just getting to Congress. If you asked me out of college, do you want to be a college professor? I said, yep, that's my dream. Then once I joined the Marines, I said, I want to be a general. And now I'm running for Congress. So to say there was a path that I took that I had, set before me, no. Like Indiana Jones, I'm making it up as I go.
I,
There's
I,
another quote for
I
you.
knew that quote was coming, and I love that quote. Well, let
It's one
me
of
say
those, I
this,
mean,
and
day at a time, but the vision is, how can I have an impact? How can I be a resource to the people? And right now it's in Congress at the federal level.
I mean, one of the things I like about you is your idea on greatness. Most people, when I ask them that question, they'll say, "Here's what I'm going to do." What you're saying, to a large extent, is you want to be a greater public servant. I mean, I think every politician should be asked, "What's your greater purpose?" I mean,
Yeah, oh yeah.
and if that's not the answer, we have to really ask ourselves, why did we vote for them? You know, if their level of greatness involves special interest but not my interest, I have to question things. I know that your campaign is going to be filled with a lot of excitement. There's going to be a lot of challenges, just as anything with life.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. You have shared some amazing insights. If somebody's listening that just wants to achieve greatness in their life, they're just saying, I want to follow this path or that path, whether it's in business or in the community, when it comes to having the right mindset, the way they think, what are some tips that you could give somebody that could help them get on that right track and stay there? Because we often get knocked off, right? But to be able to get back up on the horse and ride it to the finish line is pretty noble. But do you have any thoughts on how to stay consistent, how to exhibit determination on that pathway or that quest to greatness?
I mean, let me try to say this as short as I can, but it's not a simple response, but it's simple in its execution. You brought up, JJ did tie buckle, but the one thing that we always leave out of a leader is selflessness.
That's right.
You need the determination, absolutely. That cannot be overstated enough. But as you're going down this path, people join something not to help an individual or make them better than they are. It's for a greater cause, a greater purpose. And the selflessness that I put in this, I will experience difficulty, but I'm always pursuing this vision to be something for everybody else, to do something for everyone else. You said public servant. It's service to the public first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so whenever anyone wants to try to achieve greatness, you always got to ask yourself, what are you achieving that greatness for? If it's for yourself, it's going to be hard to form a team around you
That's right.
to make you
Yep.
succeed. But
I know how important teamwork was in the Marine Corps, right? Teamwork was everything. And there was that trait, the U in buckle for JJ did tie buckle was unselfishness. That may be the hardest one these days for people to really embrace because it's a very self-centered society. So
I mean, yes, you're right. The society is all about how you can make yourself bigger,
that's right.
better. Really, you have a greater satisfaction when you go out there and try to do more and help others than you could ever do for yourself. So to really achieve greatness, you have to be determined.
Yeah.
But if you're achieving greatness to help those around you, help your community, help your neighbors, you will realize quickly how much more determination, how much more effort you can put into the adversity when it's for somebody else and not for yourself.
You know, I think it goes back to, look out for the Marine to your left and to your right. It was never about look out for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And that really empowers you. I always kind of sum it up with this too, that it's easy to drive by the gym when nobody's waiting for you there and justify not working out tonight. But when somebody's waiting there for you, you tend to show up and you tend to have the best workout ever. So I love what you're saying. You got to put others as a priority.
And it's funny you bring that up. So March 8th, giving everyone a heads up of when this was filmed. March 8th was yesterday. And that was the 1 year you're talking about selfishness and Marines to your left and right and what you will do for them.
Yeah.
As you brought that up. So my good close friend who actually encouraged me to run for Congress, his name was Mo Navis. He was in Iraq and was killed a year ago yesterday. Left behind 4 kids and a wife. Strong Christian man. Definitely helped. Me and him helped each other through special operations school. We were always there together. We were officers together. He was killed because there was a joint operation in mountains and a multinational special operations individual was wounded, and he sprinted down to his aid to ensure that guy could get pulled to safety. That's the mentality that you get with a Marine. That's the culture of it's never about you.
That's right.
It's about everyone else and how we can achieve the mission and continue to push towards success. Your feelings, your attitudes go to the wayside to ensure that you're doing everything you can for those around you. Sorry, you said that, and I
mean, those are the powerful stories though from when you serve. That's that's what helps to forge your character.
It does. Oh my goodness.
And to see somebody make the ultimate sacrifice for someone else. I'm not saying any politician's probably going to do that right now. But how great is it to have somebody running who understands how to put others as a priority? That's priceless to me. And I know that's not lip service with you.
Those are the type of people that you were able to model yourself after and really strive to want to be like. So when I'm running for Congress, I mean, there isn't a day that goes by where I don't think of, Mo and what he did and really to make sure every step I take is to honor him and the sacrifice he gave.
Yeah.
So you and me can continue to live in the country that we do and always strive to make it better and make it more successful and greater for our future generations. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that Tyler, you bring so much to the table that we can only get a small serving of it today. There's so much experience, so much wisdom you have, and your ability to rally people, I think, is going to be huge over this next year and a half. As you launch your campaign, I just want you to know, in addition to appreciating our friendship, our bond as Marines, I just appreciate you taking some time today to share with our listeners some ideas on greatness, things that you've done in your life in the military, or specifically the special ops side of things. Fascinating to everybody, but also on the congressional run. That's something very few people do. We don't have a in-depth knowledge of what that process looks like, but you went through it, and you're about to start it up again for the people of this state. I mean, that's just of your district, and that's huge. So I just want to thank you so much for everything you shared. I love the insights that you gave to us, not just the Indiana Jones quotes. Love those too. But I think that we have some. I think we have some T-shirts and bumper stickers in the making with some of the stuff that you said today. It's that powerful. I can picture people taking a lot of notes today. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's always a blessing to talk to another Marine, but really just another friend. So no, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun just to spill my thoughts out there and see what sticks. And it's always a blessing to see what little quotes that you never even thought you remembered you said, and people run with it. Just as I have in my life.
Yeah.
No, that's the greater blessing is being a resource to those around you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything. You have our support. I'm excited to do a little campaign work with you. I've never done that before. So I'm excited to get my hands dirty with you. But I love that you are for the people, about the people. I love that you're building trust, and you're just putting us as a priority. So thank you.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate it. God bless.